How's it going, everybody? In this video, I'm going to go over 4 tips to making friends as an adult. So, as we get older, it gets harder to make friends. Basically, through high school and then up into college, these sort of social groups just automatically form. And a lot of people find as they move out of those environments that it becomes harder and harder to make friends. And there are a few things that we can do to kind of make sure that we continue to cultivate friendships as we move forward in time. So that's what this video is going to focus on is just a couple of different things to keep in mind as you are just interacting with people. And making friends when you get a little bit older for a lot of people tends to mean you have to be more intentional, right? This is not true for everyone. Some people, it just naturally kind of comes together. But here are some of the ways that you can make sure that you're intentionally cultivating some of these friendships. The first tip is to become acquaintances first. And basically what that means is, it's very unlikely that you're just going to meet someone and then magically it aligns that, oh, all of a sudden we're hanging out all the time and we're best friends and whatever else. Like that might be true when you're, 15, but once you start getting past college and things like that, it becomes less and less likely, right? A lot of people have jobs for long periods of time, so the people you work around tend to become more stable, and you just have less interactions. So one of the things that you can really do and cultivate is becoming acquaintances, and by that I mean basically just inviting people to things, right? If you already have some sort of friend group, then it becomes very easy. You just allow other people to join in when you're going to do things. You invite them to a lot of things. And this early phase is important because this is when you start to sort of figure out if they're the type of person you want to spend more time with. I've seen it fairly common that people will end up spending a lot of time with people that they don't particularly like just because they're available and around. So, in this early phase of sort of inviting people to things, and whether that be with a group or whether that's just with you, right? You need to pay attention to sort of what the feelings are, what the boundaries are, and how those interactions go. Because there's no reason to really invest heavily into a friendship if you don't feel like feelings of respect are being reciprocated, basically. So obviously there are other things that you can kind of do, like sort of scope relationships to different things. And I think this happens naturally for a lot of people where it's like, oh, these are the people I see when I play this sport. These are the people when I see at work. And so one of the things that you can do that's really nice is to kind of start crossing a lot of those friend boundaries and inviting people to a lot more things. On a similar note, engaging in small talk in a way that you basically stay open to things is a really good way to sort of become acquaintances with people, which is to say that even if it's not a very specific event, right? If it's not a, hey, I'm going out with my friends, do you want to come with us? If it's something more like, oh, hey, I heard you like this kind of music, this person is playing, right? Something that's very open socially, so you don't have to commit to basically saying like, oh, you're coming with us, but just saying like, oh, this thing is happening, can increase the number of times you sort of run into somebody, get more comfortable with them, and are able to develop a relationship. Because this is what I see as the major killer roadblock for a lot of people, is they basically don't take any opportunities to cultivate the relationship. They don't invite the person to do anything, and so they don't have any opportunities to really engage in deeper conversation and get to know the other person. Which brings me to the second thing. Obviously there's going to be small talk and whatever else, but as you start to learn about the person, start to learn about their values and goals, right? As you learn about what it is that the other person values and where it is that they're going, you can sort of understand how your friendship may or may not align. So, for example, if very top of mind for you is health, and it's very important for you to not drink, for example, and you meet someone and you're kind of figuring out their values and their interests and whatnot, and they tell you, hey, I really like to party, I like to go out all the time, I like to drink, I like to do all this other stuff. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be friends with them, but it is something to be aware of. Like, okay, if I start spending a lot of time with this person, one of these two orbits is going to pull in one direction. Either they're going to drag me to drink more, or I'm going to drag them to drink less. And there are rare circumstances where, people are able to sort of mesh in a way that their values and whatnot don't really rub off on each other too much, but for the most part, in general, your environment and especially your social environment heavily influences the kinds of choices that you end up making. So by sharing values and kind of digging for values and goals and whatnot, you can sort of figure out what it is that they really care about. And this is not necessarily something that comes up too often for people. I don't see it as like a very natural or commonplace thing, but I have seen it be effective in terms of, you just ask people like, okay, what are you really interested in? What do you care about the most? People are generally pretty willing to talk about that. So it may feel like or seem like to some people that it's getting too personal or something like that, but I really haven't found this to be the case. And, if you think about it from the opposite side, if someone were to ask you, hey, what is it that you really care about? What is important to you? For the most part, people are going to be pretty open to answering that. Like I would be, if you ask me that, I'm going to tell you what it is that I care about, because it's nice that someone's just interested in the things I care about. So that's a second piece is you can start sort of looking into these things that they really care about and see how that overlaps with what you care about. So again, having the same values isn't super important, but making sure that you kind of have an idea of the type of person you're spending time with is important as you sort of develop these friendships. The third tip is to not be afraid to sort of move different directions, right? So if you start spending time with someone and your feelings are basically saying that it's not that enjoyable, or you just don't like it that much, or there's not that much connection, or you don't have that much in common or whatnot, there's no real reason to just, force investing time into someone if you're not finding a lot of value out of it and they're also not getting a lot of value out of it. Now, that doesn't mean you should be super rude to people and be like, oh, you know what, you can't be my friend because you're just not my kind of person. There's no reason to do that either, right? But if you're finding like you hang out, you didn't really have a good time, you didn't really have a bad time, didn't really serve any need for you, you don't really feel like you're doing anything for them, there's no real reason to keep doing that, especially if you've gone through this previous phase of kind of looking for values and realize that there's some mismatches where it's just like, oh, I'm super conservative and they're super outgoing and they want to go skydiving and do stuff all the time that I'm not willing to do. Now, those mismatches can be nice to actually push you to do things that you don't normally do. But if it's coming across in a way that like, oh, I just feel pressured to do this all the time, or oh, I don't enjoy really doing those activities, that can be a sign that you don't need to continue to invest in that particular relationship. So don't be afraid to sort of invest less in some of these friendships if you don't feel like they're working out or serving you. Some people can feel really bad about this, but I think it's important that we spend time with people who really bring us to life and help us sort of connect and stuff. Again, I'm not saying that you need to actively cut them out. It just means, maybe you only invite them to situations that are larger social groups or instead of going out to lunch or whatever else. But really shaping your relationship and your interactions around what pieces work for you. Because chances are if you're not having a good time, they're also not having a good time, or some other, sort of weird vibes are getting crossed. So there's no reason to push for that. The last tip for making friends is to sort of use your hobbies, right? Use your interests and your activities that you generally do to create friends, because, if you're just talking to people, it can sort of be hard to develop really, really deep relationships. It does happen sometimes, but much more often it happens bonding over some sort of shared something or other. So if you have hobbies and interests, probably the best place to start meeting new people is through that sort of hobby or interest, right? For the majority of people, there's these hobbies and interests that they may have done when they were younger that they no longer do now. Those are really great places to sort of hone in on. Like if you used to play the guitar and you stopped, maybe that's a place that you could hone in on. But if you haven't really like developed any of these specific hobbies or skills or anything like that, another thing that you can do is classes, right? If you go to a class, everyone's sort of at the same level. Everyone is learning. So that's another place that you can sort of find people and find something in common to connect over. And then you can also know that for the most part, a lot of the people have the same values, or at least some of the same values, which is to say that they value education or trying new experiences or whatever else. And then that will help you sort of develop from there. So basically, hopefully that gives you a couple ideas of sort of the areas you can focus on or things to think about as you develop friendships a little bit later in life when they're not, sort of hand delivered to you through school. The other really important piece to mention here is that having some sorts of social connections is really important for the vast majority of people. So whether that be friends or some sort of like religious group or family or something, it is really important for most people, and it is something worth investing in. And a lot of people think that it should just happen naturally. But a lot of times, as you move later into life, you need to be a lot more intentional about the way that you develop relationships, because people get busy, especially when people start having families and whatnot. You have to make time to sort of build these connections, as opposed to in the past, a lot of the time, you're just naturally fall into things. So let's move on to the exercises. 1. When you meet someone new, ask about their values. What do you have in common? 2. Reflect on how you feel after spending time with people. 3. Think about someone you've met recently. How do you feel after spending time with them? 4. Consider how you might make friends at a class or other activity. If you don't have any, find a club or class that you can join. So, again, hopefully that helps give you a couple ideas. There is a blog post on howtohappy.com with some of sort of the same ideas, but it was written by somebody else, so it's a little bit different if you want another angle. As always, if you have any questions, comments, topics you want me to cover, throw them down in the box below. Get to them as soon as I can, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to subscribe, as it really helps out a lot. If you're looking for more content, there's all sorts of information over at howtohappy.com. And if you want something a little bit more condensed and concise, I've also written the book Mindscaping, which is essentially a framework for optimizing happiness. So we'll have the link there as well. And that's all I've got. Thanks again. I'll see you next time.